Hello there, everyone. My name is Buddy, and happy May the 4th. May the 4th, the Star Wars holiday that celebrates Star Wars. May the 4th, May the Force. Get it? Anyway, because it celebrates Star Wars, that makes it one of my favorite holidays because I am, in fact, a huge Star Wars fan. I mean, my intro is literally a quote from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The hello there part, not the my name is Buddy part, of course. So, Disney owns Star Wars. And you know what else Disney owns? That's right, the MCU. Such a seamless segue if I do so myself. Anyway, the MCU is massively popular, and Disney has definitely profited from it a lot. After buying it for $4 billion in 2009, well, might as well open 2010 because it was the last day of December, it has made Disney over $25 billion, with a B, dollars, according to Business Insider. Because of all this success, there have been a lot of franchises out there, including Star Wars, which seem to be trying to emulate the MCU. And personally, I don't think that's such a good thing. What I mean by emulating the MCU is mainly just emulating the connected universe style that the MCU has made so popular. Like shifting away from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sequel thing that movies have done, and moving more towards making a bunch of content and then tying it all together with character crossovers and whatnot. Yeah, now would probably be a good time for a disclaimer. This is all my opinions, so don't get too upset if you disagree. Don't take any of my opinions as facts as well, because, they're opinions. And since this is a video essay, it's gonna be more opinionated than my usual playing video games and losing content. So anyway, let's get on with the video. Now, don't get me wrong, the concept of a connected universe is a great concept, and it's really cool when a company pulls it off, but the key phrase is pulls it off. Currently, the MCU is the only connected universe that has actually done it and done it well. Sometimes it'd be nice to have a movie with its own self-contained story without leaving tons of dangling threads and characters with unresolved storylines and leaving it for the eventual sequel. And a lot of the time, the sequel never comes because the story isn't popular because of all the dangling threads that have been left. I think that people often forget that the MCU started off by making its own self-contained stories, mostly origin stories, and only using a post-credit scene to connect them all. Then they eventually combined it all to make it into what we know today. So basically, making a connected universe is very difficult and takes a lot of work over a long time. But there is one franchise that I think can pull it off, and it is Star Wars. But the question I'm going to answer today is, should they be trying to do it? I'm just going to clear things up before we get to the rest of the essay. I don't really consider the Skywalker saga to be a connected universe, which is the 9 films, of course. I consider the Skywalker saga to just be one story told over multiple movies, or episodes, as George Lucas has dubbed them. However, I do think that the Star Wars stories, Rogue One and Solo, the TV shows, novels, comics, and video games already are a connected universe because of how the characters are just making a bunch of cameos already in different stories. Anyway, before we get into the pros and cons of Star Wars becoming a connected universe, I just want to go through some statistics. Like I said earlier, the MCU has made Disney around $25 billion. Considering that they bought Marvel for $4 billion, that means that Disney has made a profit of around $21 billion. However, Disney has only recently started to make a profit on Star Wars after purchasing it for $4 billion, according to Investopedia. They say that Star Wars has made a profit of $4.8 billion in the box office compared to the MCU's $25 billion. Links to my sources will be in the description below, by the way. So as you can see, the MCU has made over 5 times as much money in the box office than Star Wars has. A possible reason for why Star Wars hasn't made as much money in the box office as the MCU has is because of how the sequel trilogy was received. I'm not going to get into my opinions on the sequel trilogy, but some Star Wars fans didn't really like episodes 7, 8, and 9. I guess didn't really like is kind of an understatement for some Star Wars fans, but like I said, I'm not going to get into that in this video. Maybe another video. Anyways, on the Google Trends page for Star Wars, there's a huge spike whenever a movie releases, which makes sense. Then it drops down after a few months, and never gets above 25% popularity when there isn't a new movie released or coming out soon. It's interesting how the hype for, Google searches for Star Wars don't really seem to go up when a new TV show is coming out, which is very interesting. It reached its highest point after the release of Episode 7, The Force Awakens. However, neither Rogue One, The Last Jedi, or Rise of Skywalker got the popularity above 50%. Just a little fact I discovered while researching. Star Wars actually has the most searches in Utah, and the least in Louisiana. Alright, now on to the MCU. Around 2014, the MCU started gaining a lot of popularity, and it seems to have huge spikes in popularity whenever a new movie is released, which of course makes sense. The MCU releases movies a lot quicker, so that's definitely a factor in why the popularity seems to spike a lot more often. The MCU also seems to gain popularity from releases of TV shows, which is very interesting, considering that Star Wars doesn't seem to gain any popularity. Yet again, the most searches for the MCU are in Utah, but this time there are the least searches in Washington, D.C. There's also no data for Wyoming. The MCU peaked in popularity at the release of Avengers Endgame. Who could have guessed? Anyway, this brings us directly into our final statistic before I get into the pros and cons, and then eventually my opinion at the end. So, on the list of the top grossing movies in the box office, Avengers Endgame is second, and 4 of the top 10 grossing movies are part of the MCU, but only 1 of them is part of Star Wars, which establishes that the MCU makes Disney more money than Star Wars. Sorry to all the Star Wars fans out there. Just want to let you know that I'm trying to be as objective as possible. I love both franchises and can't really pick my favorite out of the 2 of them. So just so you know, I'm not being biased towards one or the other. Anyway, let's get on to the part of the video I'm sure you've all been waiting for. The pros and cons of Star Wars becoming more like the MCU, which means them adapting the connected universe style, and then my opinions on if they should or should not. Okay, so let's start with the pros, the reasons why Star Wars should become more like the MCU. So the first reason I can pretty much explain in one word: money. I mean, you could probably see that coming. The MCU has made much more money for Disney than Star Wars has, according to my sources, which will be linked in the description below. So it's pretty obvious that Disney would try to make its other franchises similar to one of their most successful franchises. I mean, Star Wars is successful, but like I established earlier, the MCU seems to be more successful. That way people that like the MCU might give other franchises a try after hearing that they are similar to the MCU, leading to more money for Disney, which in the end is what Disney wants. Another pro is that when their characters cross over, it creates a lot of hype for the fans. It's a great feeling to see a movie and then watch a character you know from that movie show up in another movie and have the feeling that watching the movie has paid off because another character is appearing in other movies. However, this could be a problem if it's not done right, which leads us on to the cons, or reasons why Star Wars shouldn't become a connected universe and more like the MCU. So, there have been a lot of crossovers in recent Star Wars material. Spoiler warning for The Bad Batch, The Mandalorian, Star Wars Rebels, Book of Boba Fett, but I assume you've probably already seen them if you're watching this video. I'll give you 5 seconds to click off this video if you don't want the show spoiled. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so if you don't want spoilers, you've hopefully left and gone and watched a different one of my videos. Okay, so there's Fennec Shand in The Bad Batch, Ahsoka Tano in pretty much every show, Bo-Katan in Rebels of the Mandalorian, literally Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, and a lot of characters from The Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett. But the Book of Boba Fett is basically just Mandalorian Season 2.5. So why am I listing all these characters? Well, it makes sense on Earth, because very important and powerful heroes will probably end up coming across each other, because compared to the Star Wars galaxy, Earth is kind of a small place, and this is my point. Does it really make sense for all these characters to be constantly running into each other in a galaxy with hundreds of thousands of planets and trillions of beings? I mean, I can see it with Luke Skywalker, because he's running around the galaxy searching for Force-sensitive children like Grogu or Baby Yoda. But in The Bad Batch, what are the chances of Fennec Shand and Cad Bane both being tasked with hunting down Omega? Or the Pikes hiring Cad Bane to enforce their rule over Tatooine in the Book of Boba Fett? It just all feels too convenient, if you know what I mean. So this is one of the biggest issues in my opinion, because the style of the MCU with tons of crossovers just doesn't make sense in the Star Wars galaxy. I really like it when everything fits well into the world building, and something about it just doesn't make sense to me, that all these characters are just showing up because the galaxy's a huge place. And I highly doubt it's just me. I mean, I'm sure that some Star Wars fans like it, and I do too, But when I look at it from like a large scale, it just kind of bothers me sometimes. So that's the main reason for me, but I still have a few more reasons why I don't think Star Wars should embrace all the crossovers the MCU has in their connected universe style. So you've probably heard about some of the failed attempts at creating a connected universe that have happened to some film franchises in the past. DC. So this goes to show that it is very difficult to create a connected universe in the style of the MCU, which is what Star Wars seems to be trying to attempt. Now, I think the reason that the MCU has been able to do this so well is there are actually two reasons. The first is that they made individual movies and then connected them all, which makes it like a lot easier. And the second reason is that the MCU already had a massive connected universe, which is the comics and the characters and the storylines, which makes it significantly easier to create new content because you can just take characters and storylines out of the comics, tweak them, and then make a great movie out of them. The problem with Star Wars is it doesn't really have any pre-existing universe to base content off of, making it much more difficult to make the sheer amount of content the MCU is making. I'm not going to talk about the quality of any shows or movies because that would open up a whole new can of very opinionated words, so I don't really want to discuss in this video. I'm just going to discuss quantity here, not quality, but the MCU has released more projects in 2021 than Star Wars. A cause of this is probably that the writers of Star Wars have to make a lot of stuff up from scratch, but the MCU could just tweak already existing storylines from the comics, like I said earlier. They don't necessarily always do this, but they definitely take a lot of inspiration from the comics when they're making their storylines. Anyway, you could bring up Legends. However, the Star Wars writers don't really seem to use Legends for ideas that much. At least not as much as the MCU uses the comics, because it seems like Lucasfilm, or at least, Dave Filoni does seem to use Legends a lot, but some people like Lucasfilm seem to not really like Legends that much. Now, I'm not saying these are the only reasons why Star Wars should or shouldn't really become more like the MCU. These are just the reasons that are most relevant to the issue, in my opinion. Speaking of my opinion, I don't really think that Star Wars should become more like the MCU. I prefer Star Wars as a series of movies following a set group of characters, instead of jumping around the galaxy and doing a bunch of character crossovers. Don't get me wrong, it's really cool to see a crossover in a movie or show, but in my humble opinion, the Star Wars galaxy is just too big and doesn't really make sense in the world of Star Wars. It's a small world, but a ginormous galaxy. And I really like it when everything in the film universe lines up and makes sense to each other, but that's just me. You are completely entitled to have your own opinion on this, so don't feel like I'm telling you what to think. Also, don't get too upset if you disagree, and again, I love both franchises, and I can't really decide which one I like more. So I'm just trying to look at the facts as objectively as possible, and then come to a conclusion based on those facts. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.